Alright, welcome. Hope you guys like that thumbnail. I spent some time on that one, and indeed, we're going to talk about the fallout from last year's Los Angeles, California wildfires, because this week what happened was the depositions of the firefighters came out. So we have sworn depositions now. We've got a lot of new stuff to talk about. You may ask why I'm not talking about the war in Iran, and I did want to talk about that and include it, but it's a whole separate topic with a whole different approach. So that's going to be the episode next week. Because unfortunately the war is probably not going to end this week, right? So it's not going anywhere. I'll do a different video about it. It'll be a whole separate thing. Here we're going to analyze the deposition of Scott Pike, the LA Fire Department. You see it here. He responded to the Lachmann Fire on January 2nd, 2025. And I did an episode about this in October. It was episode 149. I'm going to link it in case you want to cross-reference it. But with now this new information we're going to get from the firefighters, specifically Mr. Pike, there's going to be a lot. We're going to play 2 minutes of him describing what he saw to begin with, and his professional diagnosis and recommendation. Then I'm going to pause it and analyze. You guys know how this goes, right? So let's go.
Our orders were that we were going to have what we call like a hose pickup party, or we were going to be tasked with going to pick up hose at the fire that occurred the night before. I didn't even know it was named Lachmann Fire at that point. I'm putting two and two together now, but that's what it was. But at the time it was just like, hey, the fellas had a brush fire last night. We're going to pick up hose. It was near the end of the line, and we were down in the burn. And it was about that time that I was just looking around, and I saw light smoke on the ground. I saw branches that were smoking still, and I could smell smoke. And there were, I would say, several smokers. In that immediate area, I'd say there was like a handful, like 5, but that's a lot to me. It's just an indicator that stuff's still hot.
So was there a containment line near where you first saw these smokers?
Nothing obvious. To me, it didn't look like there was a very good handline cut. Not a clean differentiation between burn and green. And there was a lot of unburnt fuel in the burn. I looked around, there were no other firefighters.
So, to a layman, right? Obviously, I'm not experienced with big fires, of course. But it seems to me like he's describing it was the perfect scenario for a wildfire to start. If you think about those conditions he talked about, you got hot and dry, previously burned ground, so you got ashes, you know? You could reignite that very quickly. You had a mix of burnt and unburnt area. There's fuel, as he called it, fuel for a fire, right? So it was, there was a potential there. If it was just burned black, then that would be fine. That's what you would call containment. He asked him about a containment line, you know, and there wasn't one. Then, of course, the whole reason he was there, this firefighter, is to remove the hose. They're picking up the hose, you know, which gets rid of the firefighting tools and capabilities. So if something were to happen, you don't have the equipment there in place. And then you also had understaffing, which they sent one guy, right? He said he was there. There weren't a lot of guys there, and you'll see that the other guys who were there, they're either uninformed or unmotivated, because of course this is right after January 1st. You know, this is right after New Year's. So if you did want to create the most destructive fires in the second biggest city in America, those are some of the conditions you'd want to create. The conditions that unfortunately happen. Does that prove that those conditions were created intentionally? No, of course it doesn't. Of course it does not, but it's something that makes you want to investigate. That's how that works, right? It's the kind of a thing where a retired person who's living a quiet, normal life all of a sudden vanishes and goes missing, and you see that there's a life insurance policy that got taken out earlier that year, something like that, or they recently changed their will, right, which happens all the time, then you would start to investigate by questioning the institution that was responsible for that firefighter response, and then see how they responded, see what kind of behavior was there. So we're going to keep listening to Scott Pike. He's going to tell us how that went and when he raised the alarms.
Nobody. I was the only one. So I went around and I exposed a couple areas of different sizes, and that's where I noticed hot coals underneath the ashes. I could feel the heat coming off of it, and I didn't even want to use my gloved hand because it was hot. So I just kicked it with my boot to kind of expose it, and there was like red hot like coals that was still smoldering, and I even heard crackling. I go, from my experience, I feel like we've been assigned to pick up hose today, but I think a better move would be to pivot and go to charge these hose lines and do a more thorough mop up just based on that small area as a sample portion for what I was seeing. The way the hose was coming down the hill into my area, I did what any good firefighter would do is there was residual water, I cracked the coupling and I pinched the hose and I directed it into the ash pit to try to get the residual water to just cool that off and start to do something to mitigate these ash pits.
And
it steamed and it crackled, and the amount of water I put on it was still not enough. I didn't put it completely out. So in my mind, I was just like, I feel this requires further action. I just saw a couple of firefighters. I don't know their names. I don't even know who they're assigned to. And I just said, it was like almost sarcastic. I was like, hey guys, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Like maybe we should be charging these lines instead of picking them up. And then they just kind of looked at it and were like, so.
You know, that happens. Yeah, I think that this is familiar to a lot of us that work in maybe not this exact environment, but these kind of environments. You try to warn the company about something, right? You try to bring it to the attention of the organization. Everybody's just there punching the clock. I'm not saying that that's what happened with these other firefighters, but he does stand out to me, this guy. You know, I find him to be very credible. And anyway, I'll let him finish up.
I initially brought it to the attention of my coworkers who are firefighters. I felt like I got kind of blown off a little bit, and then I mentioned it to the captain. Once in my mind I decided that one thing needs mopped up. In my mind, everything needs to be addressed. So that's how I approached him, is like, hey, cap, skipper, whatever, we have hot spots. We have some ash pits or whatever. That's an alert to double check the whole area, and maybe we need to switch our tactics. So that's all it was. It was a blanket attempt, and if a captain can't pick that up from me saying that and make the right choices, that's on him. Because that's not my job to overstep and tell him what to do. He earned that rank. So that's how we work with chain of command. Understand I was the only one up there. I'm an overtime guy. I'm not a captain. I don't make the decisions on this. We're good soldiers, so I've been tasked with picking up hose. I'm like the house guest. I'm not going to just tell people or try to micromanage and give commands. I'm not in charge.
Did you ask the captain why he hadn't directed other firefighters to mop up the area better, as you put it?
No, because you don't question the captain.
I wonder if he asked, if he would ask the lawyer asking him the question. You could ask anybody. Do you question your boss when they make decisions? You know, it's obviously not. But he said what we've all heard many times before when he was questioned, because basically now he's getting questioned why he didn't do anything. You know, why didn't you do something about this if you saw that there were conditions that could start a fire that were not satisfactory? And the answer is the answers he gave. Rank. You know, there was the captain, there was orders, there was a chain of command. He just did his job. Usually we talk about this in the context of, military, what the police say, but here it's a fireman, so it's a little bit different, but it's the same system. You don't question the captain, and that's it. We're good soldiers, there's a chain of command. He earned that rank, that's not my job. This is top-down decision-making, and it's not me saying that he did anything wrong. Really, I just want to talk about the decision-making style. It's hierarchical, order giver, order follower structure, whatever you want to call that. It's chain of command, and that structure by nature, it allows for crimes, injustices, and abuses to occur on a mass scale all over the world. That's been pointed out. We know that, right? I'm interested in the alternative, because I don't believe in getting rid of leadership. Like, if you get rid of leadership and everyone has the quality of decision-making power, everyone has the same input, the same amount of power. And, that sounds nice, but that's not the alternative that I'm going for. I just want the best structure. I want what works the best. And the best structure for making decisions and communicating tasks, it does have that top-down aspect. There has to be a top-down aspect. One person flips the switch, and then all the others, like an assembly line, they play their role. They can trust that there's a blueprint for what's going on, for the decision that is made. They trust that that's made for a reason, so they don't have to redo everyone's job and in their mind verify that it's the right thing to do. That would be like everybody has to know how to sew a piece of clothing, and then how to build a bridge, and how to program a computer, or how to do plumbing. It's just not possible for all of us to be specialists in all those things when there are so many specialized tasks to do. Even in a simple society, I'm not even talking about the society that we live in now. I mean, like, just to be prosperous and successful as a human species, you still need separation of tasks and specialization. So there's value there. There's a necessity to not have to redo everyone's job and redo the decision-making process, and be able to work as a team. It requires that aspect. And that's how we do things in government, in institutions, in administration, right? You got the top-down aspect. But what's missing is the feedback capacity. Every system needs a feedback. Every good system needs a feedback to send information the other way. The best structures are going to have information that can flow quickly and easily downstream, but we don't have the information flowing back upstream to inform the system of itself, right? And to be self-learning, self-correcting, the way the Earth is, right? The Earth is a self-correcting system. We just take the top-down part in human society. So you would need an ease of communication from the last guy in the chain, the guy that's there on the scene, straight up the hierarchy, or straight up to the chain, all the way up to the first, all the way up to the top. Because if this firefighter could have told his captain, hey, are you seeing this or not? Why are we not recharging the hose and mopping up this fire? Are you seeing what I'm seeing right now or no? This is what he was thinking, but it's not what he said, because the system is in such a way that he doesn't have the freedom to do that. I work for a construction company. I'm second in charge to the owner. So that would be like the fire chief, right? That's the big boss. And if the big boss decides this is what we're going to do, we're going to do it. In my job, I'm going to do it, just like this firefighter did. And that's what it is. Either we do it, or you have the option to quit your job and say no thank you. But the difference is that in my life, I have the freedom to tell my boss, why the hell would we do this? Like just talk to him just face to face, like normally, without any kind of worry about rank or experience. Like I could tell him, what the fuck are we doing? That's okay. I could say, I think that's stupid and here is why. So there's a freedom and an ease to give feedback, at least in my job. That's why I like where I work, and in the military and the law enforcement and firefighters, you don't get that. You don't get that kind of a freedom. And I'm not even talking about refusing the order. I'm just talking about making the higher ups justify their decisions. When the vision is not clear, when the decision is questionable, can the ones in charge explain their blueprint for why the order is given? And that would solve a lot. That would just that simple fix to all of our systems all across human society. It's all about information having the freedom to flow upstream as well as downstream. When it comes to dealing with how we manage the necessities of nature in a society, which is, fire, like the firefighters, water, air, food, dealing with violence, in my view, that's the best system. You basically keep a lot of it, but you have to have the ease of communication back to the leaders. Now, I'm a natural law anarchist, which means I don't support the order follower system. I don't support qualified immunity, none of this stuff. But it doesn't mean that I support getting rid of rank and leadership positions. It's just, it would still be voluntary, but you would still have rank and leadership. That's what I think. I'm not a utopianist. So we should keep the trust. We should keep the productivity of a system that can work as a unit without arguments and debate. You don't have to argue and debate about every little thing. We should keep the convention of leaders, and some people are just better suited to make decisions than others. That's the world I live in. All I'm really calling for is a true meritocracy. And for a true meritocracy, you have to allow for the lowest rank to challenge the highest rank. And a true meritocracy is strengthened by scrutiny. Scrutiny doesn't make things fall apart, it strengthens it, it makes it sharper. And in the culture of the firehouse, with the fire chief, if there was the freedom to challenge each other's decisions, then to me that organization wouldn't have the tendency to cover up things like internal conflict. To me, that's the best system, and we should implement that system. But then, even if you have a perfect system, you need an ethical override. You need a subjective veto. The individual always has to have the power to veto things. And it's not even, this is not something that's going to be written down in a document. This is something that happens outside of organizational structures. This occurs in the individual, inside the heart. This is an internal process. Because even if you have a great leader, even if you raise your concerns to him and he defended his decision successfully, even then, if something doesn't feel right, you just don't do it. Very simple. That's it. You don't do it if it doesn't feel right. And that override has to be present in any system. And so that's the most important thing for us today. It's like the system is the way it is for now. And until we change it, we still have the ethical override. And there are a whole lot of people, be it in the police, in the military, or in your life, that just, we have to use that ethical override or veto power often, because there are going to be things as time goes on where it's going to become normalized to do it on a mass level, but we know it's wrong and we shouldn't participate in it. That's the blueprint for a better society for me. So aside from this topic, this is what we should extract and implement in our personal lives. One is respect for leadership. You trust those that have earned their trust, and don't be the weak link in your chain of command, so to speak. It's not really a chain of command, right? But this is something I try to remember, that there are people who are better than me. There are people who are above me in whatever field that is, right? People that I respect, that I look up to. And, I respect their decisions. I still scrutinize them, but there's an understanding that you're not always the main character, or you're not always the leader in your circle, and that's okay. But number two is speak up. On the other hand, don't ever be afraid to challenge somebody, no matter their relation to you, no matter who they are to you. Give honest and valuable feedback. That's always a good prescription for life. Those are the two pillars, so to speak. And then you have the ethical override. Every action that you take, you have to be able to justify it. If you can't justify it, then you don't do it. So our worldview structures are objective organizational structures. That's like the jury, that's our jury, but our heart is the judge. Because it's always you who is the executioner, nobody else, just you. So you have to be the judge by yourself. Ultimately, it's on you. Regardless of how society is organized, that's how my life is organized. That's what I propose to you. If society was organized this way, then the captains, the leaders, they would have the kind of integrity and character that this fighter has. So I'm going to listen to what he says with you, because he is going to talk about this system, how the system treated him, and how that affected him as a human being.
I just went back to work, picking up hose, awaiting new orders.
Did you ever get new orders?
No, sir. And a lot of guys that were there that day, it was the second, so post-holiday, I was already working overtime because nobody else wanted to work it. So a lot of people were like, let's just get this hose picked up. That was the sentiment I was feeling. Like, we have orders. I haven't really spoken much on it because it kind of sits heavy with me that nobody listened to me. I felt like I got kind of blown off a little bit, and I haven't seen anybody step up and take responsibility. None of my leaders, none of the city leaders, nobody. I saw something, I said something, and to my best ability, I felt like we could have done more. I'm at the point in my career where there's a lot of stuff that people don't listen to us, okay? As you can probably see what's going on in the whole city, so.
Did you ever see anyone else that day extinguishing any smokers?
No, sir.
in your experience, all of those are capable of rekindling, correct?
Yes.
The distance between the X where you saw those smokers and where we see this yellow dot label Palisades Fire origin, do you have any basis to give me any estimate as to how far that is?
200 to 300 feet?
In your experience, can an ember blow 200 to 300 feet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did anybody ever come to interview you in connection with an after-action report for the Lachmann Fire?
No, sir. I thought that was kind of weird. I feel like an accurate report would have involved interviewing people who were actually on the scene that day.
He said many things here, and it does get a little bit chopped up. I haven't found a full unedited version without the cuts, but I believe that's because this was released by the lawyers, actually. But I wanted to address a few of the things he says before I play the part of this that to me is really bombshell, because there's a bombshell part. Some of the things he said that it was January 2nd, right? So he's working overtime because nobody else wanted to work. That's another one of these factors that in my head, I'm adding it to the seemingly perfect storm of factors that made these fires as bad as they were. But by itself, it doesn't prove anything, right? But it is something to keep in mind, especially as we're going to get into the historical parallels like the Reichstag fire, okay? And that's one thing. He said he felt like he kind of got blown off, and that there's a lot of things that people don't listen to these firefighters about. Right? To me, that's extremely important, because it's something that's present all across different facets of society. They don't listen to the chemists about the dangerous chemicals when they sound the alarm. They don't listen to the farmers about the pesticides. They don't listen to software guys when they talk about AI. They didn't listen to Semmelweis in the 1800s, the doctor in the 1800s who was saying you got to wash your hands after you touch a dead body. You know, that's kind of how it happens with these people, these whistleblowers in society. And then the public, the people, they generally don't hear about it because typically the professionals that sound the alarm and raise concerns, they do so to their peers. They go to the other professionals in their field. But what we see happen in the professions is these people get brushed aside. They get blown off. That happens again and again. And it's not necessarily because of hierarchy and order giving and order following. That happens outside of that system even, because at the root of this is a human issue. This is a psychological thing. It's not just the structure. It's the psychological issue comes first. It's actually the result of, like, that's what causes us to use the kind of social systems that we use. You know, representative government the way we use it, hierarchical top-down decision making the way we do it. Seeking validation outside of ourselves. It's the psychological that is first. And here's the issue, right, that I'm talking about. It's that the people who care, when you care about something, you care enough to change your behavior. So these people, they care enough to change their behavior, and what they're presenting is only knowledge. It's neutral, but it has an implication. It necessitates a change of behavior. And then you have people who don't care. And the people who don't care, they don't want to change their behavior. It's as simple as it is. It's like a behavioral inertia, regardless of their rank, their motivation. It's just the mind of a person. And that's what allows for mass tragedies to occur, whether or not government corruption was involved. Like, this is aside from that conversation. But the last thing he did that I want to point out is he reacted real heavily to that question. Did anyone else talk to him after that day to get more information about the Lachmann Fire? His other answers are like, yes, sir, no, sir. And then when they asked him this, if he was interviewed after the fact, he said, no, and. He said, no, and I thought that was kind of weird. He said, I feel an accurate report would have involved interviewing people who were actually on the scene. So no one talked to him, even though he was in a position where, he was prime witness number one. The fact that he was not interviewed, it suggests to me that there was a finished narrative about the Lachmann Fire already prepared. That's the most likely reason you wouldn't interview someone like that. It's if you already have all the information that you need. If you know that when you interview this guy, nothing that he says is going to change what you put out, then why interview him? You know what I mean? That's what that suggests. And we're starting now to get not only into the perfect storm of circumstances and factors, the structure that enabled that poor response. But then we're talking about the behavior of the government after the fact, because that's what you do in an investigation. You don't have a way of going back in time and seeing what actually happened. You're not going to be able to recreate that present moment, right? The investigation is really in the past, in the future past, as in like what happened after the fact. What were people doing? What were they trying to do? What were the motives for that? So all we can do is look at behavior and see if it's nefarious. Are there indications of nefarious behavior? Are there behaviors that indicate complicity, right? Because now, when I play this again, you're going to see the city lawyer, the guy who's handling the deposition. He's going to start to ask this firefighter questions about him seeking a lawyer in the past year, which has nothing to do with the fire. What it has to do with is Scott Pike's credibility. That's why you would ask a question like that about, hey, why did you consult with lawyers in the past year? Because that triggers the potential scenario in the mind of anyone hearing this deposition, right? He's gonna think, hey, maybe this guy has a hidden motive. Maybe he's trying to sue the city. Maybe his lawyer told him to say that, and you'll see how that all plays out. By the way, sorry about the dogs barking. I can do nothing about that. It is Sunday, but it does help me. It does help me out a bit because I got this big heavy bag. This is an aside, but I get the box in my apartment, which I'm pretty happy about. So I'll take the good with the bad and let the dogs bark. I hope it doesn't inconvenience you too much. Anyway, back to Mr. Pike.
Go ahead and say it. I saw some stuff that didn't line up with what I saw coming out from my leaders. ATF. This ATF report was 76 pages long. Do you know how many pages there was on the Lachmann Fire? Do you know?
Tell me.
1.
Are you familiar with the McNulty law firm?
Yes.
And you're aware that the firm represents some of the plaintiffs in these Palisades Fire cases? Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm just asking for a yes or no here. Have you ever spoken to the McNulty firm or any of the lawyers there?
Yes.
And how did you know to get in touch with the McNulty law firm? Like, did someone refer you?
Yeah, outside the scope might invade the attorney-client privilege.
I'm not feeling comfortable answering these questions right now.
Why does him seeking a lawyer way after the fact have anything to do with this limited discovery order, unless you're conceding you're just opening up discovery all the way?
My personal actions to seek any legal advice from any lawyer at any time is my personal decision. All the stuff came out, and any of my concern to seek counsel was after I saw. I'll go ahead and say it. I saw some stuff that didn't line up with what I saw coming out from my leaders, ATF, whoever. I sought protection from my fire chief for any future immunity, anything in retaliation, because that's what I fear. I didn't have anybody from the city contact me and say, hey, we'll represent you. We got your back because we want the truth. Am I not allowed to seek personal counsel with is there some sort of rule I broke? Or I'm asking too, why is that relevant? I feel I should have the privatized right to seek counsel no matter who it is. I'm asking why you're so concerned with who and when I sought counsel.
They want to try to discredit you because you reached out to Mr. McNulty,
I
one of the
object.
plaintiff's lawyers on the case, and they want to try to say that Mr. McNulty talked you into giving your truthful testimony today, which we all know is false, but that's why he's asking.
Can we just get back to the deposition? I'll ask my questions. You guys can object, and if his counsel wants to instruct him in a certain way, he can do that. So, just to be clear, you are represented by Mr. Sollett from Bush Gottlieb, right?
Yes.
You're not represented by the McNulty law firm, right?
No, sir.
Okay. When did it become clear to you you would not be represented by the McNulty law firm?
Okay, outside the scope, I'm going to repeat the same objection. This is way outside the scope. His choice of lawyers has nothing to do with what the judge allowed to happen here. And now it's become harassing and oppressive for this witness to sit here and be peppered by the city's lawyer on things that are way outside the scope.
It feels like retaliation to me.
These are the kind of things that I'm keeping track of.
What do you mean by that?
Meaning, I feel you're out of line. What does it matter? If we're all seeking the truth, you should have my back. Whoever, you're with the city, right?
Yeah,
Right, sir?
he is. He represents the
You
city.
represent the
I represent
city,
the
so
city.
we should want to get all our kinks figured out, get our fire department back to normal staffing, good command, good decisions, and whatnot. So what does it matter where I seek legal counsel when I'm part of a deposition, which is part of my job? What does it matter where I seek legal counsel? Because I don't see anybody just wanting to get the truth. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Well, there's this. I can handle this.
I love how he does that. He tells the lawyer, "Oh, hold on, I can handle this," and I love that. Yeah, he can handle it. You could tell this is a guy that doesn't need to hide behind lawyers. You know, this is what people act like who can justify all their actions. And this is a side point. You know, we live in a world where false accusations can really result in your life getting messed up. But I always said, I'm not worried about anyone making any allegations against me. I've always said that. No matter how heinous they are, I'm like, go ahead. Because I'm confident in my ability to defend myself. Like, I wanted to show this guy to you because in a system or in an internet, mostly it's like the internet, but even on TV you see people and you just don't know who to trust. You see so much corruption, so many lies. There is such a thing as a person that you could just tell he's telling the truth like that. And I'm, confident in that as like my trump card, even if something was brought against me, even if I was politically targeted or anything like that. Like, I'm confident in my ability to defend myself and the truthfulness of my speech and recalling the actions that I've taken. And I've taken many actions that, like, honestly, if you brought them up, it would be really embarrassing. I would be ashamed of those actions, but still, like, that's the price I'm willing to pay for being able to look myself in the mirror at the end of the day and see a bold and honest person. Like, I know I'm kind of asking for it, but I am asking for it. Like, do your worst. I'm not afraid of anybody. You could challenge me on anything I've ever said here. I really think it's worth living that way. It makes me really. It's something that brings me a lot of joy, just like in living my life every day. Like, it's something I don't think a lot of us think about, but like, just to be a person of character and strive towards that. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's like it's quite a nice thing to have to wear on your shoulder. There's people who say, I can handle this, like this guy, and that's who I would want to be in charge of decisions that affect other people's lives. Not people who hide behind lawyers. And I think that kind of summarizes how I feel about society. I think the wrong kind of people are in charge. I think the systems in government organizations, they allow for inept people to stay in positions of power, while the competent people like this guy, the true leaders, they have to jump through more and more hoops to keep the society going. And that's kind of how we run things. And another thing is, there is such a thing as a credible person in this world. I trust this guy. Look at his eyes, especially now that he's gotten angry. Like, the care and the righteous indignation, it comes to the surface. This guy's not an actor. A lot of videos you can't tell if they're artificial intelligence. This one you could tell. This guy's not an actor. I've never seen a politician look like this. Not one. I don't even believe it's possible. And it's not to say politicians can't get angry and yell, because they do, and I've seen it. But it's never like this. And I won't go too deep as to why, because it's kind of like explaining why you like one song more than another song. But I think when you put it all together, the complete lack of hesitation from this guy, cohesive, quick recall of events with the visible emotion that suggests a certain type of moral character, that's why I trust this guy. And that's also why my default for investigating institutions and their leaders is that I don't trust them. Like, until proven otherwise, I don't trust them. I'm going to assume that the leader of an organization, especially if it's government administration, I'm going to assume that it's not true. That's just based on what I've seen. But, let's get back to it.
Here's that everything we know about reports being redacted, information being missing. I believe this ATF report was 76 pages long. Do you know how many pages there was on the Lachmann Fire? Do you know?
Tell me.
1.
Woo! So it gets heated fast, right? Information was redacted, files were missing, and then you got the Palisades Fire report, which are the greater fires that reignited 6 days after the Lachmann Fire. They were 76 pages. Then the Lachmann Fire itself is 1 page. So that supports what kind of hypothesis, right? That supports that the hypothesis that the narrative for the Lachmann Fire was pre-finished. That's what would make sense. Evidence in files being missing, that indicates nefarious actions by the agency that handles the evidence in files. That's usually what happens when you see stuff come up missing from the evidence locker in the police, in the police station. Generally, that indicates that the people in the police are trying to cover up each other's criminal involvement. It suggests that. It doesn't prove it, it suggests it. But when we talk about behavior after the fact, this is what we're getting into. You're seeing the behavior again. This is another instance of what the government was doing at this time. This is the equivalent of like cleaning up before the cops show up, deleting messages. So there's no evidence, but you're seeing that here with one person you've got 100 texts. There's usually 100 texts, and over here you have one text. It doesn't prove anything by itself, but it indicates, I was hoping not to say this, but where there's smoke, there's fire, that type of a thing. And we're going to come to an end anyway. We're going to let him finish up.
So here we sit in this room with all these hundreds of $1,000s in staffing and everything like that right now. And what are we talking about? The Lachmann Fire. So we all know that the investigation, interviews, and everything could have been done better, right? That's why we're all here. Because it's a big deal, I may have sought representation from multiple lawyers. So I am feeling a little harassed while you're fixated on this one lawyer or whatnot. That's none of your business. I can consult with whoever I want as far as I know. There ain't nobody from the city that was reaching out to help me with this. I had to go. I don't have the trust of the city. I had no backup from the city, and I don't trust the city after seeing stuff with my own eyes. Come on, don't make me go there. Please. Please. I'm trying to do you a favor, I feel, okay? And the city a favor. I don't feel that's any of your business, who I tried to consult with to get representation for this very day.
Okay, why don't we take a short break? You can consult with your lawyer.
I'm ready to go. I don't need...
And I'll see if I have any more questions.
You want to just finish up? Because
I need a break.
Okay.
All right.
Where you guys are at is...
So look how quickly that ends when he doesn't accept the premise that he did something wrong. I really like to see that. He didn't get defensive in that way. His defense is to say that he's looking for the truth, and he saw that nobody else was. And he saw things that concerned him enough to worry about actual retribution. So he does not trust the city government after seeing what he saw. So very quickly, as the deposition ends, we've got other firefighters, right? This video that I got it from is 13 minutes, and about 11 of those minutes were Scott Pike. I love that he made it clear who is feeling comfortable in that conversation. He's basically saying, hey, I don't need a break, which suggests that the truth is on his side again, right? Typically, the person that's losing a fight is the one that needs a break. The team that's winning the match, they're hoping the halftime whistle never comes because they just want to keep going. They want the moment to keep lasting. But the team that's losing, they can't wait until the halftime whistle. They want to go and they need a break. They want to try to find a way to turn things around. It's not 100% rule, right? But again, that's why we went through the entire interview, because it takes a full spectrum analysis to come to accurate conclusions. I'm not pushing any conclusions on you. You draw your own conclusion. Now, I want to shift from talking about the implications of the fire testimony and talking about the 2025 Los Angeles wildfires and my own, speculations and investigations about that. So if we were to come to the conclusion that the government is culpable or complicit in these fires, then how and why, right? We would call that a false flag if we came to the conclusion that a particular government orchestrated or aided an attack on their own infrastructure, personnel, or territory. That's called a false flag. And usually these are military-style attacks. You had the Gliwice incident, which is Gliwice incident. Today it's Polish territory, and that was a false flag attack on the radio station Sender Gliwice. in Poland, it was staged by Nazi Germany on the night of August 31st, 1939. So it's right before the invasion of Poland. Along with some 24 similar incidents, the attack was manufactured by Germany as a casus belli, justification of war, to justify the invasion of Poland. Despite the government using the attack as a justification to go to war with Poland, the Gleiwitz assailants were not Polish, but were German SS officers wearing Polish uniforms. Okay, that's a well-known one. Another one that's a little bit lesser known is the Mukden incident. It's September 18th, 1931, so it's 8 years before that. It's pre-World War II. A Japanese army lieutenant, he detonated a small quantity of dynamite close to a railway line owned by Japan's South Manchuria Railway near Mukden, which is now Shenyang. The explosion was actually so weak that it failed to destroy the track, and then a few minutes later a train just passed over it. So it was not successful, but it was successful in the way that they went ahead with the narrative. The Imperial Japanese Army accused Chinese dissidents of the act and responded with a full invasion that led to the occupation of Manchuria, in which Japan established its puppet state of Manchukuo 5 months later. And then you have Operation Northwoods and the Lavon Affair. You might have heard that one. Those are examples where the USA and Israel, respectively, they had official documentation and plans of false flags as covert operations, although those two were not actually carried out. So they're, it's public information now, declassified documents where they talk about the false flag they were proposing, but they ended up never doing it. And then you have the Reichstag fire, which is actually not as unanimous as the other first two, according to historians. But it is widely accepted that that was a false flag by Nazi Germany. And that one was 6 years before they did carry out the Gliwice false flag, right? So it's the same organization, that's why it is commonly believed that they carried out that behavior, especially because it resulted in the end of political opposition in Nazi Germany, right? That's what did it. And we're going to talk about the Reichstag fire a bit. But the others, they have to do with bombs, with assassinations, with clear acts of human aggression, aggression of humans against other human beings and political organizations. But could you achieve similar aims with a wildfire or a toxic chemical spill or a sabotage of critical infrastructure? You could do that. It's possible, and it's not to overuse that term false flag. That would be something like covert environmental terrorism. And we cannot go back in time to see if there was covert environmental terrorism, but we can look at patterns. And those patterns would show you what you could call an anatomy of false flags. And that is a phrase that I wanted to use because it happens to be the titles of several works by people, researchers that I want to call your attention to. This is somebody that I have not heard before, but it's Stephen Lachmann. I actually found out recently that he was based in Chicago and he recently died. So rest in peace to Stephen Lachmann. This is Anatomy of a False Flag, where you could, I'm going to link all these. I'm not going to read through them, but you can read through them. There's he mentions the sinking of the Lusitania. I just scrolled past it. The Lusitania incident is well known. Talking about pre-World War II. I believe he talks about Vietnam, Gulf War, September 11th, post-World War II, a lot of them. So very, very interesting stuff. Then also Dave Hodges did another one, the Anatomy of a False Flag Event. This is from 2016. The other was from 2013. This article examines 3 critical aspects of a false flag event and then applies what is known. Okay, so then you have things that he brings up like rehearsals and exercises. You see that a lot, rehearsal for the event, right? Then he's listing a lot of these. Then when the false flag involves assassination, the following characteristics are present according to him. You have the lone gunman with no second shooter, right? Oh, there's always a discovered diary or manifesto, or you see this, maybe not always, but again and again. Very interesting things. And then also, I don't remember which one of them did it, or if they were just quoting it. But I heard this in the Sophia Smallstorm interview with Ole Damagard, who, Ole especially talks about a lot of these things, and Sophia Smallstorm as well, who is very awesome person. I much respect to them. So I'm going to link all this if you want to check it out. They've pointed out some of these repeating characteristics, right? So when we're talking about the wildfires, you get this scapegoat who acted alone, of course, circumstances where the usual response was not there, circumstances where there aren't any witnesses, and very often in these kind of events you see an untimely departure from a routine, right? There's usually a protocol, there's usually a routine, and for some reason it didn't work that way. Either a protocol was changed or something like that. Now the counter argument to that is, of course, well, bad things happen when you don't follow protocols. It's like when you didn't wear your glasses one day and then a piece of a sharp piece of debris fell in your eye and your eye got hurt. You would say, well, that's because you didn't wear your protective equipment, and that's when things like that happen. Okay, that's true, right? But it is still something to consider as one of these factors, and then you look at the totality and like, that's interesting. He happened to not wear his glasses that day, right? And then also you have, so often when you find people in a position that they don't usually find themselves in, that's, especially when we're talking about in organizations where it's very standardized, very hierarchical, right? If we're talking about the military, where you don't just get a new person in a given rank or in a given post. It's usually that guy, that's his post. There's a very standardized, set way that things are done. But what we find in some of these events that we investigate is that something changed. Like Kermit Tyler during Pearl Harbor in 1941. He was working like his first shift in the new position, and his job was to look at the radar and look for enemy planes, with no training, not even familiar with the radar. You should read that story for yourself. I don't want to quote it but I remember reading it a long time ago, and I just brushed up on it because I forgot the name, but it was Kermit Tyler. It's fascinating. Then you look at the Reichstag fire. It happened at night, so nobody was there, right? So nobody else saw it, no witnesses. Then the police arrest this guy, this Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe. He doesn't look too bright. He just seems to be like a guy. 24-year-old young guy, and of course he admitted to doing all of it by itself. Had a brief trial, and he was executed shortly after. Actually, the fire department chief of the head of the Berlin fire department is Walter Gemp. That was the head of the Berlin Fire Department at the time that fire happened. He was actually arrested and killed in prison. So the Reichstag fire happens February 27th, 1933, and then on 25th of March he's dismissed for presenting evidence that suggested Nazi involvement in the fire. Gemp, he actually asserted that there had been a delay in notifying the fire brigade and stated that he had been forbidden for making full use of the resources at his disposal. Now, maybe that sounds familiar, right? So now, when we're talking about the Lachmann Fire, in addition to these interesting factors that we already reviewed and the testimony by Scott Pike, this Lachmann Fire was started by a 29-year-old young guy, similar idea, and it was on January 1st. And then it didn't burn from then it was put out, and then it rekindled on January 7th, and it became the Palisades Fire, which burned until January 31st. It was the whole month of January. It became the most destructive wildfire in LA history, right? And it was all started by this 29-year-old guy named Jonathan Rinderknecht, the guy that you saw in the thumbnail. And I even remembered the name. I didn't have to look it up before this. Just when I saw the depositions, I'm like, what was his name? Rinderknecht, that was his name. And I remembered the last name because it was so unique, right? It's another young guy. He threw a cigarette in the woods. The media said that he searched up on his computer, can a cigarette start a wildfire or something of that sort. And he's actually been held in jail. He's been held without bail since October when he was arrested, So going on 6 months now. And I remembered the show I did on it. It made me think of that scapegoat for the Reichstag fires. Because I saw the name Rinderknecht, and then also Lachmann itself. The name of the fire is it's a German name. It's a Germanic name, and the fires. You know, I think Lach is a lot of words in German, but it also does mean lake. Like Lachmann, Lakeman. I think about the LA Lakers, right? But that's beside the point. Those fires rekindled January 7th. So it's the day after January 6th. And to me, that jumped out at me. I was like, isn't that fascinating? Because, you know, January 6th is supposed to be this huge Capitol riot, this storming of the Capitol. But that actually happened under Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party. They actually did that. What the media told us happened was actually happened in what was called the Beer Hall Putsch. You know, this is German history. But you know, then I'm seeing this like triangle or like these similarities where you had this Reichstag fire at that was Germany's Capitol building, right? That was the symbol of German government power. It was set on fire, and that led to right-wing totalitarian power, and then it led to, you know, war, big-time war in Europe. And then we've got these wildfires. They're happening in California, right? But it's happening right around this time where we have the anniversary of a storming of the U.S. Capitol by supporters of Donald Trump. And, you know, Donald Trump had an attempted assassination, just like Adolf Hitler had an attempted assassination. They were, you know, Adolf Hitler was actually put in jail for what happened at that time. Now, Donald Trump, of course, did not spend a day in jail, but he had the impeachment, he had the trial and everything, right? So there's this overlap. There are these comparisons, in addition to, you know, the names and the dates. Because the Reichstag fire was February 27th. It was 93 years ago and one day until the launching of that Iran war, the attacks on Iran in 2026. That was February 28th, launched by Israel and the United States. Which again is an overlap because you think about what World War II was. It was, you know, of course, it was the Holocaust. It was all about the Holocaust. And of course, that's what led to the creation of the State of Israel. And today, the State of Israel and the United States of America are attacking Iran the day after the anniversary, the 93-year anniversary of the Reichstag fire. So those are just some interesting tidbits, right? I won't call it anything more than that. But either way, both of those fires, the Reichstag fire and the Palisades wildfires, they're both examples of another disaster that turned out to be caused by human intervention. Not human-caused climate change, but actual human actions, which is kind of the point of This Week in Tyranny, is to talk about the psychology and human actions and the things that we continue to do, the behaviors that we continue to repeat as a species. And when we look at elements, we're seeing elements like stand-downs, cover-ups, we're seeing the scapegoat. It's really a tried and tested formula, which, you know, I've talked a lot about it. The only question left to ask is why, right? Why? The Reichstag fire, the why is very obvious. It was about consolidating political power. But when we talk about the Palisades fire, these are wildfires, or some of these other things I've talked about, like the Columbia disaster, and the lesser known ones like the actual shuttle fire, when the technicians were working on the Columbia space shuttle and 3 people died. It was actually not a fire. It was a nitrogen. There was a fire and there was a nitrogen test, and it was actually a lack of oxygen. But it's beside the point. It seems to have. It's not very famous. It's not very well known. There wasn't huge political action afterwards, but still I bring it up. Why? Why do I bring these things up when there's no apparent political motive? And when we talk about this Palisades series of wildfires, the answer I would offer to the question why is because the unspoken motive of government is to eliminate human equity. That's the goal. It's less power for the people. It means more power for the powerful people, and that's what it comes down to. Basically, it's like make human society weaker and more chaotic, And that puts you in a position to control people more easily. A wildfire definitely does that effectively. A mismanaged wildfire does it even more effectively. And this is what I want to end with. It's like sometimes we ask the question, like, what if they did this? Why did they make it so sloppy? And the answer is because sloppy implies the necessity of implementing new management protocols. That's what it's about. It's not just that a tragedy occurred. Wow, this is so terrible. It's like a tragedy occurred and it was because of human beings and it was because of the current system. So we need to change the American system to make it more like, and I'll say ... because these are things that, I've talked about before when we talk about environmentalism, United Nations, the sustainable development, right? You talk about technocracy. Those are different topics that we've dove into before. But we are seeing those patterns of the decline of democracy in the world. I put that in quotes, democracy, right? Because it's just we are seeing kind of we're seeing liberties. We're seeing departure from civil liberties, and I guess live and let live. That's the simple, neutral way to say it, right? A mismanaged wildfire will do that. Will help in that agenda to get rid of that equity by the people. A mismanaged wildfire would do that. So would an unjustified war, which I will talk about. I will talk about Iran, but it's going to be a separate video. For reasons that I'm going to talk about in that other video, I want to show you some things, right? But I didn't want to contaminate this episode with that. This episode, it really was made with a lot of dedication to let you draw your own conclusions. For like 170 episodes, I've talked about it all these topics, and I don't really often explain myself from square one. But in this one, I kind of did. It's like no prerequisites required, no assumptions made. You don't have to know me. It's just an analysis for you. It's really done in the spirit of a firefighter like that, Scott Pike, to just show up, do your job, look for the truth. That's what it's all about, this guy. That's what it's all about. That's the face of a man of integrity. Anyway, be professional and trust that others will do the right thing. That's what it's all about. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much. I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.